Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Paperback Possibility Podcast, or welcome if you are new. Today we are talking about our book club book for this month, which is The Haunting of Styre House by Amy Cross. We have been doing some reading.
Oh yes, that's what we do here.
And we are here to talk to you about the book. Now, The Haunting of Styre House is a book that it's a ghost story. It's a very traditional ghost story. There are a lot of horror elements. There is a little bit of gore. I would say content warning, emetophobia, content warning for gore as well. Else?
I don't know what emetophobia is, but I would say gore, eye horror.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of eye horror.
Decapitations.
Disembowelment.
Rotting.
Yeah.
Oh,
stuff animals like as well. If you don't like animals being...
If you don't like animals or cats, if you don't like cats being kicked across the room, then don't read this book. Yeah.
The Haunting of Styre House is very interesting. It's by Amy Cross. Now
we don't know about Amy Cross. I'm suspicious of Amy Cross.
I've learned about Amy Cross.
Oh, have you?
Purportedly, she writes her own books.
Oh yeah.
So she's written over 200 books, right? Over 200 books.
She releases like one a month. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really, really quick. And she apparently writes all her own books. Doesn't use AI. It's not ghost written. Amy Cross isn't apparently her real name, but it's close enough according to the website.
The one thing I will say is I was very suspicious of Amy Cross before reading this book. And I was like, how do you pump out this many books this quickly? And then I read this book and I was like, oh, that's how you do it.
It was... Right, we're going to get into the book, as always, with the Paperback Possibility Podcast. Oh, hi, by the way, I'm Ashleigh.
I'm Alfie.
If you haven't heard from us before, every month we take it in turns to pitch 2 books to each other, and then the other person's going to be like, hey, read this book, or I would like to read this book. And I think I chose The Haunting of Styre House.
Yeah, of my 2 picks.
Your 2 picks, yeah. So we ended up picking it up. With the podcast, what we do is we start off by talking quite lightly about it and then going into spoilers territory. We are going to keep the first portion of the podcast a little bit shorter from now on, so we can really get into the meat and bones of the book. So you get to decide in the first 15 minutes of the podcast whether or not you want it.
Yeah, and then spoilers, we're going to go right in.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it straight away, not particularly in order.
No, it'll just be a general
talk about the book.
thing, yeah.
We've listened to feedback, we have also discussed what we like to do, and just really like getting to
talk about the book proper, you know?
Yeah, and if you can hear the horns in the background, it seems like outside on our street they're having a party. So basically, you read the book before me.
I did, yes.
So you sat down, you read it all pretty much in one...
2 sittings, I think, yeah.
And then I read the book in a sitting, I think.
Yeah, it's very short.
It's quite short. It's 188 pages, I want to say. Yeah. It's also, I think, 99p on Amazon if you do find yourself listening and want to pick it up.
I'm sure it's one of those books that's almost definitely on Kindle.
It is on Kindle.
Well, there you go, yeah.
It's definitely worth picking up if you like a traditional ghost story. If you want to, I feel like, without getting into spoiler territory straight away, it's a book that you 100% want to pick up if you want an easy-to-read horror to tick off a book on your TBR or to add a book to your total of books that you've read this year.
Also, if you're a genre reader and you love horror and you're just blasting through horror books because that's just your thing, this can happily just go into that queue and just be like, oh yeah, this is another thing that I love. But I think for the average reader who's not got loads of time to read and is probably reading 1 month a book, one book a month ish, or thereabouts. Unless I'm not really a person who would say you want to be adding to your totals because you want to get to the end of the year having read X amount of books, because I find that if I start doing that I stop liking actually reading. I'm doing
absolutely.
it and so if you're like me and you're like that, this book is probably just not that interesting to you because it's not that great. It's all right and it feels like a whole, but it's kind of I don't know, if you I think you have to really be kind of scraping the barrel for good horror fiction before you get to this particular story. Which doesn't mean it's bad, because it's not bad. It is actually quite good. I liked a lot of things about it, but I'm never gonna say, like, if someone comes up to me and is like, "Oh, Alfie, like, I'm really like wanting a book." Oh, camera's on the move again. I really just want to read a book. Have you got any recommendations? This wouldn't even be anywhere close to anything that I would recommend.
I feel like with this book, we talked about this a little bit, because Alfie and I have been having car problems, and our car is
still in the garage.
It's been 4 weeks.
Yeah,
this week
been about a month. Yeah.
But because of that, we've been going on walks to town, which is about an hour and a half away walking from where we are. And I remember talking about this book on the way into town, on the way back from town one time. And the thing is, I definitely think that this book is one of those books that I will think about in a couple of months' time, in a couple of years' time. Like, oh my god, do you remember that book with that cat?
Yeah.
That horror book that we read with the cat. And what I will be doing is, if the books from the rest of the series go on sale to under £1, I may pick them up. I might not. It depends. I don't think I'm going to be thinking about this book actively enough to keep an eye out, if that makes sense. But it's definitely follows a lot of horror tropes.
Yeah.
To say the very, very least.
I think with a book like this, when you've made something so tropey in the way that this is, generally, like, I think what people want, or what I want, if you're going to make something tropey that isn't done very often.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to, like, so, for an example, there's a really, really amazing 3-part film series on Netflix called Fear Street, which really captures that, like, 80s slasher vibe, which we don't really have a lot of that these days. We do have slashers, like Scream, etc., but, like, that, like, subgenre is very small, and, like, had its time in the 80s, and, like, we don't really make that anymore. We make a lot of, like, possession movies these days.
That's true, actually.
Yeah. But the 80s slasher was, like, a thing of its time, and it kind of went, and that was the end. So Fear Street comes out, and it's a 3-parter, and it goes through all of the slasher vibes, and it's really, really good at doing that. Whereas this is, like, it's just like another ghost story, and the twist is it has a cat, like, at the centre of it. And I like the cat, but, like, it's not really enough to make me go, it's not an itch that needs scratching, you know? So, yeah, so I like it, but I don't think I really needed it.
Yeah.
You know?
So the story follows Alison, the mother, and Parker, a 15-year-old daughter, who move in the UK to a remote village in the UK.
Yeah, it's very UK based.
I'm sure but we'll get onto it. I think Amy Cross has a lot of Americanisms in her writing, and it did confuse me.
But she is apparently English. Is that right?
I actually don't know the answer.
I think we looked this up when we were reading it.
Yes,
we
did.
This conversation.
You're right. We did. So Amy Cross is very English, but she's very English. But she has so many Americanisms in her writing that there were times where I was like, if this is so heavily UK set, why is it like this?
Yeah, and that's what makes you think, like, did an AI write this? Because, like, AI is, like, classically very American. I don't want to accuse Amy Cross of being.
She says on her website there is no AI, and I don't think it's AI written. I don't get. It might
be AI proofed.
Maybe
that could be why.
Maybe we are not going to be throwing around AI accusations because
then the AI will come for us and kill us.
Shush. But Alison and Parker moved to this house that's remote. It's been closed off for a year. The Styre House council have been trying to get rid of it, basically, and it's just becoming this asset that's, well, what's the opposite of an asset? Like a disasset?
Yeah, a burden.
A burden that they can't get rid of, and it's just making money, like losing money, sorry. So what they do is Alison and Parker decide to move in because Alison's dream is to start a B&B.
Yeah, and Alison has just divorced her husband, I think she had been divorced by her husband.
Yeah.
And she's taking it really hard. She's not really dealing with it well, and she's kind of using this as like a distraction and but also a kind of way to prove to herself that she doesn't need him and she can do what she can do without him.
And she's put this like massive big project on.
Yeah.
Because she thinks that is how she's going to prove herself to
Yeah.
herself,
Yeah.
but to everyone around her. And Parker is a typical 15-year-old girl. She doesn't really want to move, but she's doing it for her mum. And actually, straight away, the characterization between Alison and Parker, I don't know if I buy it as like a very, well, I buy it as a mother and daughter relationship because mother and daughter relationships can be like this. But Alison is very much, she treats Parker as like more like a best friend. And it's very much like Alison is guilt-tripping Parker into a lot of stuff. There's a lot of gaslighting, and it's not really addressed because we see almost like a split narrative between Alison and Parker. But I believe the majority of the book is told through Parker's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she's obviously 15, and I really don't think that she would necessarily pick up on the fact that her mum is gaslighting her and sort of like trying to guilt-trip her into believing that, you know, this is the best thing to do and not really taking Parker's own feelings into account when it comes to the move.
And Parker like has like a lot of good points like about the house.
Yeah.
And she like she's like a relatively intelligent person who just looks at this house and is like, what are we doing here? This is absolutely insane. We've moved away from everyone that we know to this house that is literally falling down, and it like literally is like in one of the first scenes, like things are like falling off the ceiling.
Yeah, there's a massive like metal panel that
just
slides
falls
off the roof.
Yeah, and she's like, well, this is a terrible idea, Mum. Like, what are we doing? And Alison is so like focused and tunnel vision about the whole thing. She's just like, no, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. And yeah, I think there are a lot of times when Alison is just like completely disregarding Parker, and it gets worse like as the book goes on. But that's for a different reason to get into in spoilers.
Now, when they move in, the first thing they see, literally the first thing they see when they go into this house, is there is a cat who has been living in this house. It's a black cat. He is really cute and cuddly looking, but there is a sort of like guarded air around him.
Yeah, he's got this collar on that's really
It's difficult to read.
Yeah, it's difficult to read and it's very like worn away.
Yes. Yeah, it's clearly been on there for a while. So there is a little bit of a conversation as to whether or not he is a stray.
Yeah.
Or whether he lives in the neighbourhood. But it turns out there's a bit more going on with this cat than you may have thought initially. And I think now is probably a good time to dive into the main story plot.
Yeah.
Before we do, what would you rate the book?
3 out of 5?
3 out of 5.
3 out of 5?
I would also rate 3 out of 5. I want to check what I read, what I put it as on my Goodreads, but I'm pretty sure I did. Oh my gosh, I can't type from this point of view. But I'm pretty sure I did rate it a 3 out of 5.
I think it's like a good 3 out of 5.
I don't think it's quite good enough to hit the 4.
No, but I don't think it
really like.
I think one of my things
if
is
you're looking for horror.
It's like a 3 out of 5, but it's like a 3 out of 5 that's almost like it's not trying to be a 4 or a 5. It's not trying to do any better than that. It's just like, you want a short horror story that's less than 200 pages that you can fly through, then yeah, go for it. But there is some good imagery, and we'll get onto that in spoilers. But those are the things I do like about it.
It is also written, it's rated as a 3.94 on Goodreads as well. Whenever I rate stuff on Goodreads as well, I've talked about it in the podcast before, I always rate them like straight after I've written them. I really want the emotional sort of rating.
Yeah, you want to take that into account.
And I think it's funny because I've just scrolled down my Goodreads account to get to The Haunting of Styre House, and it did make me laugh a little bit because it's I saw a book that I rated 4 stars that I absolutely do not think is 4 stars in hindsight, but that's how I felt when I came off it. So so what I've written about The Haunting of Styre House: good story, but I'd say it's alright. Writing style is very easy to read and basic. There's no fluff that you might expect in a horror. Moments of gore.
That's good. That is a good point.
Lots of typical horror aspects. It feels like a familiar hug of a ghost story.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a hug of a ghost story. I don't think it's got enough about it that's different. It's got the twists and stuff that are nice, but they're not like unexpected things. Yeah. They're just like, oh, I wouldn't expect to see that I say it's not unexpected, but you wouldn't expect to see it. You're not going to read it and be like, whoa, that ghost story blew my socks off. I'd never read anything like that. You were like, oh, that's a ghost story with a little twist that's quite fun. And it's alright.
All right. It's a 3-star read.
Yeah.
We're going to get into it a bit more now. We're going to go into spoilers territory.
Everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table.
If you don't want to hear spoilers, stop listening.
This is the time to turn out of the podcast and go, or tune out of the podcast and go and read the book if you'd like to read it and come back again later. Or if you don't care about spoilers or you've already read the book, please feel free to read away. Now, if you are listening to this podcast on Spotify, please know we also have the video live on YouTube, so you can go and watch it over there. And if you're watching on YouTube and you want to help us out, please go and rate our podcast 5 stars on Spotify. Thank you very much. Time for spoilers territory. Alfie, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, I think the story... So we covered like where the story starts when they move into this house and they meet the cat. That's sort of like the basic setup. Very quickly, Alison like doesn't like the cat. She's like, get this cat away from me.
Yeah.
And Parker's like, ooh, like to the cat and like wants to like cuddle it and stuff. And he's like, you're a lovely cat. Alison, like, I think it's like chapter 3, which is like 30 pages into the book, has this nightmare about the cat coming to her room. And this is where all like the gore like starts, coming to her room and like clawing out her eye. And like Alison's like in like a sleep paralysis sort of situation. She can't move, she can't scream, and she just is like conscious of this cat just like getting at her eye.
And it is written really...
Oh, it's so graphic.
Graphically.
I loved it. That was the part that I was like, oh yeah, I'm well into this.
We also don't know at this point it's a nightmare because she has sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
So she's in this state of not being able to move, and the cat is like in her room. It's written very much like it is actually in this very moment happening.
Yeah, I did think at the time, I was like, this it's written like it's happening, but I was reading it and like, because I've read a lot of horror, I was like, oh, this is definitely a dream. This is 100% a dream.
I do not read a lot of horror,
yeah.
And this was, I did not know
this
was going to be a nightmare.
So that happens. She wakes up from the nightmare and she runs to Parker and is like, oh, what? This is all, the cat's got me. And Parker's like, don't even worry about it, Mum. It's fine. The cat's fine. You just had a nightmare. Go back to sleep. You're super stressed for like obvious reasons. You're fine. And then over the course of the book, Alison becomes to become like ill, or like her eye like starts to basically like start to show the signs of having been like cut up by a cat, but it's like really slow, and the description of it is so nasty. And like she starts off with just like her eye is like bloodshot, and then it's like itchy, and then there's like stuff coming out of it, and it's just horrible. And it's really, really good. But Parker, over the course of the book, keeps saying to Mum, like, you need to go to the hospital. Your eye is like getting worse. It's clearly infected with something. You got to go to the hospital. And Alison's like, no, it's fine. I've never, don't worry about it. And through that, Alison like slowly becomes like delirious, and this is what I was talking about. Like she becomes more gaslighty towards Parker. Is throughout the book, Alison's like deliriousness just like takes over, and Parker is just like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. You're just like, what are you doing? And you said to me at the end of the book that you felt like Parker should have just taken initiative and just taken her to the hospital.
I agree.
Because she just doesn't. She just is kind of like looking at her mum, like, who's, well, by the end of the book, Alison's eye is literally falling out, and Parker's like, it's only at that point that Parker's like, well, I think I should take you to the hospital now.
I fully understand that Parker's a 15-year-old girl, right? But I'm sorry, if my mum was, at the point in which I turned to you and I said, like, she needs to take her to the hospital, her mum had locked herself in her room. She had, like, pus coming out from underneath this eye patch that she decided
she gets like boils and stuff, like all over her neck and that.
And she's getting like she looks worse for what, like, not even by a little bit, right?
Yeah, she looks like horrific.
It's horrifying, and she's like, "Oh no, Parker, it's fine. Don't take me to the hospital. I'll be okay.
It'll pass.
And
I'm just stressed."
A note on that as well is her mum's very holistic. So she doesn't to use any like medications or stuff like that. So she's like, maybe this oil will help and stuff like that. that's also something to keep in mind, which is why I think Parker is probably more like, I'm not taking her to the hospital, because her mum is like adamant from the beginning she is not a hospital person. It's like when she starts getting itchy eye, they're like, maybe you should go get it checked out. No, it'll pass, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
it'll be great.
yeah.
But when they are, throughout the course of the story, obviously, it has all started by the fact that Alison has started having this nightmare, this sleep paralysis situation, which focuses on the cat. And she basically, Alison comes downstairs to Parker, she has this go, as Alfie said, and then says, I don't want the cat in the house at all. Get rid of the cat. I don't want him around. And Parker's like, okay, but then continues to let the cat in.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't. I don't think she lets the cat in. Like, the cat just like sneaks in from somewhere, and every time Parker sees the cat, Parker's like, how do you keep getting in? Like, is there a door somewhere that we don't know about, or a window? But she doesn't.
Allows it.
Yeah, but she doesn't like immediately pick the cat up and let it go.
Yeah.
She's just like, oh, well, you're in here now, so like, whatever.
Yeah.
So that happens.
And also, Parker's getting more convinced that she needs to find out whoever this cat belongs to. So right early on in the book, she reaches for the cat's collar, and the cat like shifts away.
Yeah,
and it's like, you cannot read my collar.
No.
And it's just
the
like,
cat being like, you cannot read
you cannot read my collar. Get it?
Yeah, I got it.
You cannot read. Anyway.
Stick to podcast.
Okay, right. So, anyway, we can't see the cat's collar.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also going to be a point of contention throughout the story. Now, Colin is another character.
Yeah.
Colin is a 17-year-old boy who works in the village. He works
He's the
for
sexy historian boy.
Sexy historian. He works for like a touristy historian kind of place.
Yeah, like town history kind of museum thing. Yeah.
And he works for a man named Henry. Now, there is talk about Styre House. There has been for years and years and years.
Yeah, loads of rumours, loads of folk tales, almost, yeah.
And Parker goes to town, and she walks into this historical place, I believe. Or she bumps into Colin in some regard.
I think she's walking through town and is like, sees the building and is like, well, that sounds interesting, I'll just go in there. And then she sees Colin and is like, oh, I'm going to stay here.
Yeah. She mentions Styre House a little bit, and I think she sees a picture of Styre House. And she's looking at it, and there are a couple of people in there, but in particular there is something that is catching her eye, and in the corner there is a black cat who looks specifically and suspiciously like the black cat that she knows. But this photo is like from 100
it's like 100 years
ago.
old, yeah. And you're like, and at this point you're just like, oh, classic ghost story business. Just like a photo that has something in it's still in the house. And I really liked that stuff, but it's at that point that as like a horror reader, as I have been for a long time, I'm just like, I know exactly where this is going. So now, for me, the book's challenge, the challenge on Amy Cross at that point to keep me interested is like, you need to now make what you're doing with that concept fun to read, which she does do just about. It's not like particularly like, wow, but it's like, I know this story, I know this plot, I know exactly where this is going to go. But you need to make it fun, and they do with kind of what happens to Henry. Do you want to get into that, or do you want me to take that bit?
Well, the only other thing I can say about this before we get into the Henry stuff is there is a little bit of weirdness about this, and Colin actually mentions this cat in the picture. There are a lot of rumours that it's the same cat that has been seen around the Styre House for the last decades and decades. There's always a black cat.
There's always the black cat.
And Parker, for some reason, lies and says that she has no idea about any black cats.
Don't know why she says that. Very strange.
There it is. She kind of justifies it by saying that she doesn't want to. She just doesn't want to. She doesn't want to seem like a
doesn't
weirdo
want to get into it.
who has also seen a black cat. And she's very convinced that this cat is real because, as far as she's concerned, this is a real cat. And when the news hits the historians and Henry, Colin's boss, about the fact that someone has moved into Styre House, he takes this opportunity to go and poke around and see what he can see.
Yeah. So Henry then goes to the house. At this point, I'm just like, I really need the book to hiccup, because this is like not going anywhere. Henry goes to the house and he kind of sneaks about and he's listening to their like Alison and Parker's conversations. He like hides in the bush whilst they walk out the house and stuff because he doesn't want to be seen. And he goes into what I think is like the outdoor shed or something.
Garage.
In the garage. And he sees the cat and he has this like really funny like, oh, I know all about you, cat. Like, you're not going to sneak away from me. You've got business, and I'm going to figure it out. And I really liked that because that was quite tongue in cheek and a bit of fun. And then the cat just kills him. Like, he like starts like wrestling with the cat, and the cat is like claws at his throat and stuff, and it gets all horrible. And whilst Henry's like dying from the injuries that he sustained in his fight with the cat, he sees this like shuffling creature like walking around like outside or in the garage. Can't exactly remember.
I think it was in the garage.
Yeah, and it's for lack of a better term, it's a zombie that's just like roaming around, and it's what I don't think he perceives it at that time, but we know that this is the previous owner of the house, of whom the rumors are about, which is Lydia, who was written about back then and persecuted as a witch, and she was buried in the house under the garage, which is where this little tiny gravestone is. And Henry like slowly dies in this place, and it kind of, he jumps between going from like this like dream like sort of afterlife place where he's in this house and he can't get out, his house and he can't get out, and then he comes back. I think he's supposed to stay in the afterlife, like in his house, and he's dead, and he's safe there. His soul is safe there, or whatever. I think that's like the idea. But he's like pulled back into his body, and then he also becomes a zombie, and he like gets up and starts shuffling about, and it has this amazing, like, one of my favorite descriptions in a horror book ever of like zombification, where he gets up and he goes to scream and his jaw like falls off and his tongue is just like flapping against the roof of his mouth. And I remember reading that and being like, that's why I'm still reading this book. It's that kind of imagery that she's gotten so right, and it's so clever and funny, and a bit, it's like slapstick in that kind of B-movie horror way, but it's fun. And like, it's not really scary. Like, I don't think this is like a really scary book. I didn't read this being like, oh, I read this, was like, oh yeah, very cool. So I liked all that stuff. And then Henry just sort of like ends up wandering around the house, like just basically kind of moaning because he's a zombie and he doesn't want to be a zombie and stuff. And he's very conscious of everything that's going on. And the whole time he's just like looking at the cat like, you did this to me. Colin then goes to find Henry and can't find him. And is like, where's Henry, everybody? And everyone's like, I don't know, Colin. And so Colin ends up having to go to the house. In the meantime, we're kind of cutting back to Parker and Alison, and just basically Parker and Alison arguing about the fact that Alison's saying, don't take me to the hospital, even though my eye is like deteriorating and I've got boils all over me and everything's just not very good. Then there is one conversation between Alison and between Parker and Colin, because they talk about Lydia and the fact that there was a witch in the house, and that's sort of where all the weirdness comes from. So you kind of got like 3 tropes going through the story, and that's the ghost trope of like the haunted house, the witchy trope, and the zombie trope, all in one story. And I quite liked that. I thought it was quite a fun little mix, and I'd say that's sort of the twist. Is like it's a traditional ghost story with witches and zombies, which you don't see that very often. So I enjoyed it for that part of it.
The other thing that we need to talk about, you skipped over Henry's death. But it was horrifying.
Yeah, it was. It was really intense.
It was, so the cat goes for Henry and, as you say, claws at his throat. But do you remember the big thing that happens in that?
No, I've gone.
He has like thousands, hundreds of dead mice crawl down his throat. Oh
yes, I forgot about that.
If you didn't hear what I said, because Alfie started getting very excited about it. He has
I forgot about that.
Hundreds of dead mice crawling down his throat.
Yeah.
And it's horrendous. And when he wakes up in this zombie-like state, he can feel them
like crawling around inside him.
It's just horrible.
Good stuff.
Very, very horror.
Yeah.
That is the first thing I think of when I think about this book. So keep that in mind.
I forgot about that.
And also, because he's becoming like a zombie, there's also like kind of like an underlying possession thing that's about to happen.
Yes, that's
and
the other
it looks
aspect.
like Lydia has been looking for a body to possess, and it kind of transpires, if I'm understanding the book correctly, as we get towards the end, that the body that she was like, sort of like shuffling and ambling around in wasn't Lydia's body.
No,
it was the previous person she had killed, again decades ago though.
Yeah.
To have a body to possess. So there's also possession going off on top of
it's everything. It's a bit of everything in this book.
Absolutely, like fair. And we also at some point learn the cat's name. Smythe.
Yeah.
How do we learn the cat's name?
It's on his collar.
I don't think that's how.
Or
we
maybe
learn it.
maybe Colin said it to Parker in the thing.
We also learned that the Styre House is actually called Smythe House.
Yeah.
But for some reason it's been renamed, and that might also be why Smythe the cat is very upset with it. And Smythe is, for a lack of a better phrase, Lydia's familiar.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, he is very much
he's the
working in
he's the
tandem.
witch's black cat.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that obvious.
Yeah, it literally is. And the book, it is very short. As I said in my Goodreads review, there's basically no fluff. And I really like that.
Yeah, I love a no fluff.
It does make you wonder how short a lot of horror books would be
without the fluff.
Like,
if you look back at one of our previous reads, which is
The
Whistling, yeah. That's a book with a lot of fluff. And that's like a book that could have easily have been 180 pages that ends up being 380 pages.
Yeah.
And like you're really like chugging through it. Whereas this is like that, but like with all the excess just slashed off and just fun. Less than 200 pages, blast through it. I like it for that.
Yeah. And I will say about the whole book, the ending sequence, definitely.
Oh, it's good.
It's a good one. It does keep you
involved. You're in, and it's like it's action packed. It's really like blasting through. Like, it starts with Parker like basically kicking down Alison's door and is like, I need to figure out and see what's going on. And Alison is like lying on her bed, like with her head like sort of like over the edge of the bed, and her eye is just like hanging off her, like hanging out by its tendril, and it's so like, and Parker's like, what the hell is going on? How have you not let me take you to the hospital? And she's like, right, I'm taking initiative. And it's like you were saying, it's very funny that it's like it's at that point Parker decided this has gone too far. I need to take you to the hospital.
Not to mention the imagery that Smythe has been bringing presents into the house, dead bodies, dead bloody bodies of animals
under the bed,
under
under Alison's bed. So you can argue that like that was like where the curse was like sort of coming from. And then I think the zombie like appears like basically there, like in the doorway, and the cat's there, and I think then the cat like goes for Parker, but I can't really remember. And there's a fire or something, and I can't really remember that either.
So basically, what happens is the zombie sort of like ambling in and is like making a very quick attempt to possess. I think there's like a possession attempt which doesn't really go very well, but this is one of those books where the ending happens at the beginning. So we know what is about to occur right at the start of the book. So this technically isn't a spoiler, technically. But Smythe ends up disemboweling Alison and beheading her, all in the space of like
30 seconds.
There is a fire that starts as well. Parker's just sort of like standing there like, what the heck is going on? And Colin
just runs in
to the rescue and ends up fighting with Lydia.
Yeah, oh yeah, they have like a wrestling match where they're just like, and Lydia's like, because she's a zombie and stuff. And Colin's just like wrestling away with her, which is really fun. And it kind of does end with you thinking, it's all fine.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they fought Lydia, they think they chuck her in the fire or something.
Yeah.
Smythe gets like kicked out the window. I don't really remember what happened to Smythe. And Alison's obviously beheaded and disemboweled like on the floor, and Parker's like, oh, this is just awful. But then you get to the next chapter, and Parker like seems like somewhat like well adjusted to the whole thing.
Yeah, she's taking it extremely
well. And then we kind of Parker's like acting really weird, and Colin's like, "What's going on? Like, why you seem like really okay with this?" And Parker's like, "Well, what will be will be." And then like I think Colin like catches her like giggling to herself or something. I don't really remember. I read this book like nearly 2 months ago, and I think it basically transpires that Parker was possessed by Lydia, and Lydia is now in Parker's body.
Yeah. Can I just correct you? It was definitely not 2 months ago.
No,
you read
because
this book.
that would have been.
It was like a month ago.
It feels a long time ago though.
But also, so the end basically transpires. Lydia has somewhat possessed Parker.
I don't think it's as a somewhat. I think she is
She
fully
has
possessed her. Yeah.
possessed Parker. But overall, I think it's a really like neat package of horror. It's a really neat package of ghost story. I do recommend it if you do like a ghost story, but I wouldn't go out of my way to read it.
No.
The other thing to keep in mind is this is a trilogy. It's the Smythe trilogy, so we should have known at the start. But I think you said the next
book's
two
the
books
prequel.
are prequel.
No, just the next one. I think the following one will then be a sequel to this one.
Oh,
but I don't know that. But I only imagine that just on the way that like the first one was written. It seems like there would be a natural sequel to this one, but they're going to go back first and give you like the origins of Smythe, the Smythe origin story.
I want a sequel to these because they're very. I like the fact that we don't really know what's going on. We like she's just possessed. Yeah. So the third one is a continuation of the second.
Yeah.
So the second and third one are both prequels. So basically the first one's 99p, the second one's $2.99, the third one's $2.99. The third one is 180 pages as well, and the second one is 178. And the second one as well isn't named after Styre House.
That's a Budacre farm, which I assume becomes Styre House.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. But now we've done the podcast, I am thinking I kind of do want to go back into the world of it, but I don't know if it's something.
No time for that.
Alfie and I have been very much like charity shopping, picking up some books. I think we mentioned it in the last podcast, and I have been reading a lot of Frida McFadden books.
Yep.
So has Alfie. We basically did a little vintage shop, and because there was a book I wanted, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, in physical form, and we saw The Housemaid on there by Frida McFadden. And Alfie was like, that looks like something I would probably read. So we ended up picking that up. And then you finished that pretty sharpish.
Yeah, because they're good.
You finished the second one.
Yeah, because it's good.
And I got Alfie the third one. And you started to read that.
Yeah. I finished it.
Well, in the meantime, Alfie went to work.
Yes.
And I was like, do you know what would be a really nice thing is if I read this book, The Housemaid, because Alfie loves it.
Yeah.
So much. What should I do? I'll read it. And I sat down, I opened the book at like 6 p.m. at night, and I had finished it by like 9:30, 10. Like, I sat down and I read it in one sitting. The next day, you still weren't back home.
Yeah.
And I had read half of the next book before you did come home. I finished it that day, and the third book, I ended up stealing it off you and reading that in one sitting.
I think I was about halfway through it, and you were like, "Yeah, I finished it," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
So I really I loved every single book in that trilogy.
Me too.
Which is why the next episode of the Paperback Possibility Podcast is going to be a little bit different. We are going to be doing a wrap-up episode on the trilogy of The Housemaid by Frida McFadden.
Mm-hmm.
Books 1, 2, and 3. We're going to be talking about all of them because we fell in love with them so much. We're just gonna go for it.
I think the next episode might be a bit longer because we are going to be talking about 3 books, but they're bloody good. They are.
But they are so good, and I highly, highly recommend picking them up. Even if you're not going to read them for the podcast and you're just going to read them for fun, please go and pick them up because they are so good. Have you got anything else to say on the Haunting of Styre House?
No, not really. I think it was fine, good fun. Not going to read it again. Not going to tell anyone else they should go and read it. But if you run across it and you haven't got anything to read and you just want to read something short and quick and snappy, go for it.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're excited for The Housemaid. We are going to be doing The Housemaid The Housemaid's Secret and The Housemaid is Watching You, I think is what they're called.
Just The Housemaid is Watching.
Oh, The Housemaid is Watching. She's not watching you.
Yeah, she's just watching.
She's just watching.
In general, she's just watching.
Frida McFadden, if you are looking for books to get into that are a little bit easier to read, please go and pick up a Frida McFadden
And
book.
good.
They are so good. They are so easy to read. Like, I have never read a Frida McFadden book that I haven't just read in one day.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that will change, but I literally cannot put them down. It's not that they're like super easy. It's like they're super easy and they are so edible.
Classic.
Yeah, like you can just devour them.
Classic page turners. Are you hungry? Do you want some breakfast?
It is early in the morning. As a little aside, I did a 12-hour stream yesterday, and Alfie was there by my side for most of it. All of it.
I was there the
But
whole time.
physically there for some of it, and we are both exhausted. It's the next morning. We have left it a little bit late to do the podcast, but we are doing it. I'm very, very grateful to all of you for watching and for being a part of our podcast journey. It's lovely to have you here. It's part of the Paperback Possibility Podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a like. We have episodes released every single 22nd of the month. Next month will be obviously the trilogy book episode, which I am very excited about. If you're watching at Spotify as well, please do rate this episode 5 stars, or the podcast 5 stars. It means a lot to us. It really helps us out. This is just a passion project. We love doing the Paperback Possibility Podcast, and we love talking about books. So come along, come and join us. It is a pleasure to have you here. My name is Ashleigh.
My name is Alfie.
You seem unsure. And we'll catch you on the 22nd of August with the Housemaid Trilogy podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much, and I'll catch you then.
Bye.